Hi friends, welcome back. So, we're done, or at least now I am, because of course I do the intros last, don't I? So, let's jump into it and I'll show you how I eventually finished what has quickly, as per usual, become one of my absolute favorite paintings. This is so different to stuff that I've done in the past, and I'm really excited to show you how I got here and to really dive deep on the finished product. So let's go. So at this point, we are basically just working on the foreground and, the finishing touches, the parts of the painting that you're really going to pay attention to, all that good stuff. So I have, up to this point, kind of had a big question mark on what the bottom section of this painting was actually going to be. I was having a really hard time deciding what I really wanted down here. I had this orange undertone that I had painted obviously in part 1, and I think that when I originally painted this, I had something specific in mind for this portion of the painting, and then when it came time to actually paint it, I found that I didn't remember what my original idea was, and honestly, even if I did remember it, it probably wasn't going to match or mesh with what the painting had ended up being, because there were so many changes that happened along the way with painting this one. It very much is one of those paintings where, of course, I used the deck of worlds, like I've talked about, to come up with a prompt for this piece, and I started painting it with that prompt in mind, and at some point it developed beyond the prompt and came into a life of its own. But this all happened so gradually and over such a long period of time. I think I've mentioned this took me almost 2 months to paint from start to finish, which is fairly long for me. I can normally finish something in 1 to 2 weeks, depending on how much free time I have. And I had a considerable amount of free time while I was working on this one. It was just, things were taking a lot longer than usual, and that's all fine and dandy, but that did mean that I wasn't necessarily remembering my initial ideas all the time. And again, I think that that's completely fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think in a lot of ways that can be a lot nicer. It can kind of allow you some freedom to come up with new ideas and new ways of kind of expressing yourself in a painting, where if you stick to your original idea, it can become very rigid. So here, I have actually been wanting for a while to do more unique stone shapes. I don't remember what the original fox painting, the one with the fox and the fairy, I don't remember off the top of my head what that one is called, but that was the first one where I really played with shaping stone and making it into something that is very clearly like man-made, or not like a naturally occurring in nature sort of shape. So I really wanted to play with that again, and I had this idea of making a fox-ish statue, and so I made this piece that honestly looks a lot better in person than it does on camera, but this little statue that I painted that is based off of 2 different fox reference photos that I've used in the past, and I kind of layered them over one another in various ways. to make it not super obvious that it's based off of a fox, but it just looks like a kind of cool little statue, which realistically is more what I was going for anyway. So then here, what I am working on now, and this is obviously how you can see the statue a little bit better at this point, is that I am doing some mushrooms, and this was part of the prompt from the deck of worlds. I needed to have some sort of fungus that was kind of spreading and getting out of control, and I had this idea to do the statue and then have the statue be inside of a glass or magical dome kind of thing, but then to have all of these mushrooms that are growing inside the dome and are spreading outside of it. So that's what I'm working on here. I think honestly the mushrooms were kind of one of the driving forces of this painting. I just kept going back to, I hadn't done a whole lot with mushrooms, and they would be a fun thing to add to this Fox and Fairy series. And this also felt like a really good way to introduce the mushrooms, because this would be kind of the place that they're coming from. And then I can have the mushrooms kind of appearing through various paintings in the future, where you would have a general idea of where they're starting from. I do have a pseudo story in mind for all of the paintings in this series. I need to write it down one of these days and get some of the bits and bobs put together so that I can really share with you guys what my vision is for this whole series. Because again, it's not random. I have a story for each of the individual characters, and that does make it really fun for me to work on these paintings and to come up with the next part in the story as far as I have in my mind. But that does make it kind of difficult for me to necessarily explain what is going on from my perspective without having the story fully written down and just having it in my head. I am actually taking some time off of work soon, and one of my goals during that little break is to write down a bunch more of the story and get it to where it's something that I can share with you guys so that you then have access to the story itself. I don't know, maybe we can do a little video where I would tell you the story and show you the paintings that are involved with each little bit of it. Obviously, I used to actually write science fiction and fantasy, so at some point, maybe down the line, I will actually write it as maybe a series of short stories or something along those lines. Maybe poetry. I actually think poetry could be really fun to go with this series. And that would be a fun thing that I can also share with you guys alongside each individual painting. We'll see what I come up with while I'm on my little staycation in a couple weeks here. But I think that would be a lot of fun. If that's something that you guys would enjoy, please let me know, because again, I would enjoy doing that. I think that would be a nice way for me to get some of the ideas out of my head in a really, in a fun way. So I like that. And again, this bottom section of the painting was just kind of annoying me, and I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do with it, and I finally just landed on making the whole thing rocky. And I think in some ways it was because that was going to be easier, and in other ways this makes sense for this scene, because again, we've got that whole cliff wall in the back, and it does really make sense to have more rock in this scene and to have something in the front of the canvas that really ties the back of the canvas in. So I did make sure to add some browns and beiges into this rock section to really make it tie in with that rock wall without necessarily going into that tan sandy color, because again, I don't really want this to be the same material as that cliff. I just want it to be evident that these would be in the same area. So eventually I landed on just keeping the whole thing as rock. I think I went through 6 or 7 different ideas of what this was going to be. And honestly, I think rock was definitely the best thing to go with. I think that it suits the painting the best. I think that it really allows you to focus on the actual focal pieces of this painting rather than having something in the absolute foreground that would potentially draw your eye from the dome and the statue and everything, because the thing that I really want you to look at is that dome, and then obviously I'll paint some foxes into here, and I do want you to look at those. I want you to see all of these little details that I'm painting. I don't want this rock section to be a thing that you really spend a lot of time looking at. This should be a thing that's there and that has a detail and that you can clearly understand what it is, but it's not a thing that would draw your eye or make you think, oh, what's that? Let me scrutinize that a little bit closer. And that's one of the things that I really like doing with my paintings, is having a section that has just the right amount of detail to where your eye knows exactly what it is, and it's not difficult to understand what it is. You can clearly see what it is, but it doesn't have so much detail that it draws your attention away from where I want your attention. There's this sweet spot of detail that's detailed enough without being so detailed that it really draws your eye and draws your mind away from the thing that I want you to see. And it does take a lot of doing to find that sweet spot and really figure out how to nestle sections of your artwork into that sweet spot. But I do think that in a lot of ways, rock in general will just kind of naturally slip into that sweet spot, especially if you put some cracks and some color shifts and you make it, again, just detailed enough that it's obvious that it's rock. Because let's face it, we've all seen our fair share of rock. So I do spend a considerable amount of time adding detail onto that rocky section. And then I decided that because I've got all those mushrooms, and because the plan is to have the mushrooms be like spreading out from the dome, that I should add some larger mushrooms over here on the rocks, just to also kind of show that the mushrooms aren't necessarily tiny as soon as they get out of that dome. My thought is to have the mushrooms be, I have that like light green fungus that's kind of glowy that's on all of my trees. This is the origin of that fungus. It's these mushrooms. So I wanted the mushrooms to be, I wanted to be slightly obvious that that's what's happening here, that the mushrooms and that glowy fungus are perhaps symbiotic, would be a good way of putting it. And I know that I don't have the mushrooms in a lot of the other paintings, but I do have a lot of ideas for how to show that the two are kind of working together. So this will be the first painting, obviously, that they appear in together, and expect to see more mushrooms from me in the future. I did really enjoy painting all of these mushrooms. There are a million mushrooms on this canvas. There's just so many of them. And I had a grand time doing it. It's one of those things where there's that little bit of tediousness, but it's not so tedious that it's boring. It's like just tedious enough that it holds your attention, if that makes any sense at all. I know that sounds really weird, but there is, again, that sweet spot of tediousness, and I do really enjoy it. So again, I wanted to add just a few larger mushrooms here at the front, partially because the mushrooms that are further into the painting are much smaller, so it's a little harder for you to tell exactly what they are, which is fine. That's kind of what happens when you have a very small detail like this. So having a couple of them that are larger and you can really see what they are, I think that was just a really fun way of doing it. And that also allowed me to paint a couple of the mushrooms a little bit bigger, which of course I wanted to do because, again, I've been enjoying the mushrooms. So I spent a considerable amount of time getting those in and getting the details on those exactly how I wanted. And then we will switch over to the foxes because this is, of course, from the Fox and the Fairy series. So there will be 2 foxes on this one. I'm only going to show you video of the red fox, and I actually want to see if you guys spot the blue fox when he goes in, because I kind of deliberately put him in a spot where he's not super obvious. So this painting is the red fox and the blue fox have come here to try to figure out where all of this fungus is coming from. And so they're kind of investigating. So I have the red fox kind of peeking up over this rock to look over here, and then the blue fox again. You'll have to let me know if you see him. He's not in this shot, don't worry. Almost always I paint the red fox first. I think the red fox is a little bit easier for me. It's colors that I'm slightly more used to, so I almost always start with the red fox, and then I'll add the blue one in afterward. And again, in these sections, I did have some issues with filming, sometimes with the tiny details and the little foxes and stuff like that. It is hard to get on camera what exactly I'm doing because no matter where I put the camera, my hand is in the way. So I tried, I did my best, and that's kind of all there is to it. So here we are adding the glass to the dome. I haven't done this in a really long time, so I was very concerned as to whether or not this was going to come out nicely. It takes a little bit of white paint and a whole lot of water, and it comes out really pretty, and it generally comes out pretty quickly too, which is nice. So I think in the end I was really happy with it, but at this point right here I was very much not. Because again, I hadn't done it in a really long time. I did end up actually having to pick the canvas up and kind of paint this in my lap. So I, again, don't really have this on camera either. But since this is the finale, I will do a little outro video so you guys can see all of the stuff that I did. You guys can see the finished painting and all that. And yeah, I think the dome came out really nicely in the end. It was very much a challenge, but I really enjoyed this painting. It took a ton of time and a lot of brain power out of me, and yet, like always, it's just turned into one of my favorites. It isn't what I thought it was going to be, and I think that just makes it extra fun in my mind. There's just something to be said for a painting that got away from you, but got away from you in like the best possible way. I absolutely love it. I am really thankful that I got to take my time on this piece and make it into something really cool and something really different. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It was a lot of fun, and let's see what the ending looks like. This one was a lot of fun and so different, as you guys saw, but I did want to make sure that I took some time at the end of this video to really show you what the finished painting looks like. I know when I was filming actually like doing the finishing touches, I didn't really get to film some of the little things that I added, and there were some steps that I kind of had to glaze over because my video quality was not as high as I wanted it to be in those sections. So this is the finished painting, and again, I absolutely love it. I did have a prompt from the deck of worlds to come up with this, but like I said during the rest of the series, I really took that prompt and really used it as a baseline for the idea, but I kind of threw it out the window by the time I got to this little cliff here. So while parts of it were loosely based off of the prompt that I did, and I did use the color cubes to come up with the general scheme for what I was doing, I didn't use the deck of worlds thing as much as I thought that I would. I did use the color cubes a ton to come up with exactly how I wanted everything to look, but I think that this came out absolutely gorgeously, even with me kind of playing and pulling in some different colors and different ideas that weren't really related to either of the things I started with. So I'm really happy with this one. It's got a bit more perspective than what I generally work with, and I think that's really fun. So yeah, basically I just wanted to show you guys a full shot of what the finished painting looks like. I think it's super cool, very different, and honestly this is kind of a theme because the next painting I'm working on is also super different and it's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely stick around in a couple of weeks and I will show you what I've been working on. Thank you guys so much for sticking it out through this whole series. I hope that you love this painting as much as I do, and I will see you in a couple weeks. Bye. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.